It wasn't the right way, but it was the smart way. Charles Barkley was ready to contend for a title, and he knew he wasn't going to accomplish this with the Philadelphia 76ers. It was time for a change. So did he go out there in his final season with the Sixers and underperform just to prove a point? Did he cause distractions on the team to force his way out of Philly? Was this all part of a plan of an evil genius? After reviewing the numbers and context of the 1991-92 season, you have more than enough information to determine if he truly quit on his team. First, let's review briefly Barkley's tenure with the Sixers before the start of the season in question. For the first 2 years of his career, he couldn't ask for a better situation. He was sharing the floor with Maurice Cheeks, Andrew Toney, Moses Malone, and the great Dr. Julius Erving. This was the same core that won a title in '83. But he quickly realized that the championship window closed before Barkley could make any kind of impact. After his third season, Dr. J retired, Moses was traded to the Washington Bullets, and Andrew Toney's career was destroyed due to a series of injuries. Now the Sixers were in rebuild mode. After a few years of heavily relying on Charles to carry the team, they were able to build a formidable squad around him by the time the 1989-90 season began. They won 53 games and they reached the semifinals for 2 consecutive years. In my opinion, the Sixers had the luxury of having the third best player in the league behind Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson. In theory, they should have been the team to rival the Chicago Bulls out in the East. But the relationship between him and the front office had reached its breaking point. Team executives were tired of all the controversies that Barkley found himself in. For example, in the 1990-91 season, he said to reporters after a loss to the New Jersey Nets, "This is a game that if you lose, you go home and beat your wife and kids." For some reason, playing against the Nets just brought out the worst in him. Late in the season, against the Nets once again, he had the infamous incident where he spat on a fan and it landed on a little girl. Imagine the world of trouble he would have found himself in if he did that today. Believe it or not, he only missed 1 game for those 2 incidents. Now if you're winning and your best player is acting out like that, then there's a reason to put up with it. But once they started losing, the Sixers wasted no time putting this once-in-a-generation player on the trade block. There was a lot of talk that he was going to be sent to the Clippers for 3 players and 2 draft picks. He was also incredibly close to being traded to the Lakers. At this point, the Sixers knew that he wanted to play for another team, so they wanted to get rid of him as quickly as possible. You can only imagine how hearing his name constantly in trade rumors was affecting his mood on and off the court. But before we get to that, there's one question we need to answer. Why was Barkley so desperate to leave? For starters, he was unhappy with the team's inability to build a title contending roster around him and the way they handled their business. For example, he told Rick Riley of Sports Illustrated back in '92 that he didn't like the way they treated Rick Mahorn during the offseason. When they released him, they apparently broke the news through a voicemail. He was upset that they didn't have the guts to tell him face to face. To make matters worse, they replaced him with Charles Shackelford. No disrespect, but if that guy is your starting center, then your team has some problems. He also told Sports Illustrated that he didn't like how Mo Cheeks found out that he was getting traded while answering questions to the media, and that they tried to trade Dr. J to the Utah Jazz at the end of his career because they didn't want to pay him. So what happened to Rick Mahorn must have been the final straw. There was no way that this team was going to be able to contend for a title as constructed, and he was getting impatient. Who could blame him? He was 28 years old at the time, and all he wanted was to win a title. It was clear that he wasn't going to accomplish this with the Sixers. His frustration was understandable. However, the way he expressed his frustration to the owner and his teammates is what burned his bridge with the organization. For example, he called the team's general manager a clown whose only ambition is to caddy for the Philadelphia owner. That was according to the New York Times. Then we have what he said early in the season. According to the Washington Post, he said it wouldn't surprise him if they kept David Hoppin, a white player, instead of fielding an all-black team. But what about his teammates? According to the Los Angeles Times, he was quoted as saying that his teammates are lazy. In addition, he said this, quote, "In the past, I would get on guys' rear ends and ride them like horses, but I quit doing that because all the guys complained. Well, we can't worry about feelings when you're below 500, end of quote. As you would have imagined, that didn't sit too well with his troops. According to the Chicago Tribune, on that very same day, some of his teammates fired back, saying that Barkley can be a selfish player who consciously disrupts the offense. It was clear at that moment that the chemistry of this team was shot. It's no surprise that the Sixers finished the season with a 35-47 record and they missed the playoffs. Now what about the performance of Charles Barkley? Check out the numbers that he recorded. He averaged 23.1 points, 11.1 rebounds, and 4.1 assists. Now let's compare to what he recorded in the prior year. He averaged 27.6 points, 10.1 rebounds, and 4.2 assists. His points per game average dropped by 4.5 points. It's already been established that this team was deficient in scores, even more so than the previous year. But yet, he averaged 2.4 fewer shot attempts. Was he less aggressive because he wanted to prove a point to his teammates, the owner, and the fans of Philadelphia? In my opinion, I think it has something to do with it. The reason why I say this is because of what Johnny Dawkins, his teammate, said to the Washington Post that season. Here's an excerpt from a 1992 article. Quote, "Teammates have noticed a change in Barkley this season. It's a very opinionated city, says guard Johnny Dawkins. Charles takes most of the heat when we lose, I think undeservedly so. It comes with the territory and his situation. I don't know if he was prepared to deal with that because he had never really lost here the way we were losing at times this season. He doesn't mean to lash out at anyone because Charles is generally one of the nicer guys in the league, especially one of the nicer all-star players in the league. But maybe it's the pressure of so many people pointing the finger at him and not at us." End of quote. Barkley has admitted since then that it bothered him when the media or fans would criticize his game. He also mentioned in that same article from the Washington Post that he wanted the team to acknowledge that he wasn't the reason why they were losing. He wanted them to show appreciation for his hard work. He said that they never mentioned that to him. This could have been his way of proving to everyone that he wasn't the reason why his team missed the playoffs, that he was the only reason why they were relevant for the moment Dr. J and Moses Malone were gone. Despite their losing record, the owners of the Sixers still weren't convinced, so they traded him away in the offseason to the Phoenix Suns. If that wasn't enough, they even told reporters that acquiring 3 quality players from Phoenix would make them a better team. So in the following season, the Sixers won 26 games, while the Suns won 62 games while reaching the finals. In the end, Barkley had the last laugh. Now I turn it over to you all. Do you think Charles handled the situation the right way? Do you blame him for forcing his way out the way he did? And how do you all remember this whole situation in real time? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.